Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And we have a very special guest today, one of our very own. I don't know if everybody has met her on the call either. It's Sandy Doherty, who is our head of operations here at Buddy INS. And Sandy plays a really, really important piece to our group business and business in general. So I wanted you all to be able to get to meet her, understand a little bit about what she does, and then in turn, have her help you understand a little bit about the areas she works in primarily. So, Sandy is a wizard when it comes to implementation. Really, what happens after the group says, yes, I would like to go forward. Though she does work in other areas, I would say that's her main area of expertise when it comes to group enrollment. So, excited for you all to get to meet Sandy and ask any questions that you have for her in the chat. There will be plenty of time for Q&A. Thank you, Sandy, for agreeing to do this. And could you start just by introducing yourself a little bit, what you do at Buddy INS beyond what I've said, and a little bit of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Well, I am Sandy Doherty, and I am the head of operations here at Buddy INS. I've been with the team now for a little bit over 2 years. Previous to that, I was working with some insurance technology in the payments industry. I was an officer with One America when Michelle Prather was there as well. So I was with them for a number of years. I've worked with the BGAs in the field. Um, and if you go way back in my background, I also worked for the paramedical companies back in a different lifetime. So I've pretty much seen the entire spectrum of the insurance industry right now. Most of what I do with Buddy, or much of what I do with Buddy, has to work with our groups and getting those enrollments set up, working with the technology partners, the enrollment platforms, and really just trying to make sure we're not missing any of the operational pieces of that puzzle. So that's kind of the place I play in. So,
So, just for starters, Sandy, so that we can kind of continue to introduce folks to the implementation side of things, if they haven't written a group. If they have, they know you quite well, I'm sure. But what do you think is really important to making sure you get a group started off on the right foot? So, I'm a broker. My group has said yes. What are kind of the pieces? That number one, we need for things to move forward, but number two, why why is it important for us to be quick and efficient and sort of decisive throughout this process?
well, I'm going to say probably the number one thing that needs to happen, and it can happen before you actually physically get the sale in the group, is to get your contracting done. Most of us actually want to get paid for the work we do. And in order for that to happen, you actually have to have your contracting and your appointment completed with the carrier that you're having that group sold with. Sometimes that's a quick 2 or 3 day process. Sometimes it is not. But very little happens until that is taken care of. And it's something so easy to take care of on the front end. One thing I'm going to throw out with that contracting, though, is once somebody requests that contracting from me, I lose visibility. I request it, I let them know what level it is, if it goes underneath the hierarchy or anything else, but then I lose it. So if you know that we are setting up your contracting and you do not hear anything for a week, please raise your hand and let me know, because I don't have any visibility until the group is sold. And I go, great, do we have your writing number? It's like, no, I never got a link or something else. And then we start back at the beginning. So because I lack that visibility, it's really easy to lose track if you don't know. If you're expecting contracting information and you don't get it, please raise your hand and let me know. So there's number one, timely information. The second piece, though, is probably the group. Make sure that the group itself is actually ready to move forward. And when I say that, we need a lot of information to get the group right. So anything from who should we actually be talking to? So we obviously need an authorized signer for the group, but we also need who's going to do their onboarding. So, or is there an HR contact that we need to work with? What are the requirements, for instance, for them? So do they usually have a 30-day waiting period for their benefits? Do they want to do this through a direct bill? Do they want to do this through a payroll deduction? Do they want to do this as an individual ACH? There's a lot of decision making that has to go into the front end, that we want to have ahead of time or as much ahead of time as we can. A lot of that is with the group application. No carrier, almost no carrier, will start an
Get this
implementation
thing right
process for a
there.
group without a group application. So a lot of this information that I'm talking about is required for that group application. We have a soul case file. It's a form that's on the Buddy portal that you would fill out. Once you fill that out, your group is ready. It comes directly to me. That starts the entire process. So I'm just going to keep talking here, Jason, by the way.
No, no, please
So you can
do.
stop me.
And for all of you, this is really a lot of information for Sandy to be able to get out there to help her help you and vice versa. That's what I really want to accomplish here. So yeah, yeah, keep taking it away. This is great.
Yep. And
Jay,
one of the things,
oh,
go
sorry to
ahead, Mark.
interrupt. But if you want, feel free to share their screen because I know that sold case process in the portal is relatively new, so
I
that
can do
might be
that.
helpful to
Yep.
share that while we're going through this. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nope.
So that form is available in our group process page in the portal. And this is designed to kind of walk you through step by step the group sales process. I know where this lives, so I'll just go right down to it. It is under step 4. We have the group sold case information here. So this is kind of the granular level of detail we need once you've sold the case to get it to move forward. A lot of the broker information, self-explanatory, but Sandy, are there any common areas where people get tripped up as they're walking through this form that you think would be good to highlight?
It's a pretty simple form if you know the group. Again, you're going to actually have to ask the group for what their tax ID is. You do want to make sure that you have their legal business name. That's a really important piece of it. Um, I'm going to be putting by the way, another field on here. I'll just let everyone know. Although we have authorized officer's name on here in their email because they are the signer on the application, we're going to add an HR contact or an onboarding contact on here as well, because usually I have to go back and ask that question. Um, so I'm gonna say really that is the biggest piece of this to get everything set and going. Now, once you fill this out, I am going to actually complete the group application and I'm going to send it to you through PDF. So you can look at it. You can look at it and say, yep, this is right. Or, hey, Sandy, I think this needs to be changed. You are welcome to share it with the group. If there's any questions that you have on something, because if the application is not filled out right, the group will not be built correctly and therefore the enrollment process will not be done correctly. We do not want any of those things to happen. Getting this right the first time is what will make a smooth enrollment. The biggest lag time is that we complete this group application and I send it through DocuSign, which is how I send it, and it sits on somebody's desk or it sits in somebody's inbox. And then we have to talk to the broker and say, hey, we sent this to Mario. Did Mario sign it? Do you need anything else? Did they have any questions? So, and that's what I meant when I said earlier is make sure the group is ready to move forward. If they still have unanswered questions, we probably don't want this application process to go out yet. Part of this application process actually lists the effective date and the enrollment dates. And some groups are really good and we have 2 or 3 months and we have plenty of time to plan and put the marketing and every other piece together. And other groups right now will still call and say, hey, can we get a 1/1 effective date? By the way, the answer to that is no. You cannot get a 1/1 effective date right now. You can get a 2/1, and that one's getting kind of close. As a general rule, we need 60 days from the time the application is signed before you can have an effective date. And that's a really short period of time. 90 days is a much better period from the time the application is signed until the effective date. in order to give time for all the education that Gretchen is going to do and work with the HR department and the webinars and just again
Landing
making sure
pages.
everything is set up perfect. Yes, getting the education in there. We don't want to cut that any closer than necessary.
Yeah, so the more lead time we have, the better. And we'll continue to go through this form, but even just in the quote request form on our um, in the portal here, when we are looking at expected first enrollment month, you don't need to know this number off the top of your head. But if you don't have an idea about when the group would like to enroll, I would assume again at least 90 days because if we're not even at the point where the group has said yes, we're just going in getting proposals and we know we want at least 60 to 90 days from the time we're ready to move forward to an effective date. I would look to again 2 to 3 months out, leaning toward three when you request the quote, just so we can kind of get an idea. Of course, you can feel free to communicate with us if you feel that the group is going to need something that's going to require a tight timeline, but just be proactive about this piece specifically because it does have a lot of bearing on everybody who's working to make the enrollment a success. So back to the group sales process, back to the sold group form. And a lot of these items we've gone over before on previous study groups, but I think Sandy's able to give a lot more um, insider perspective on some of these things. Sandy, one of the things we've always said on the study group is that carriers are generally willing to be flexible with certain group asks as far as maybe minimum hours for eligibility, how to go about enrolling new hires, things of that nature. They generally have interest in fitting in with what the group is already doing with their benefits. Do you find that to be um, a similar experience, or is that an experience you can vouch for in most cases?
Yeah, absolutely. In most cases, the carrier wants to do with what the group is already doing with their other benefits. So if all the other benefits have a 90-day waiting period, this benefit should have a 90-day waiting period. If the rest of their benefits, are 0-day waiting period or 20-hour, the carrier is really flexible, but it really should match what the group is already doing. Now, one of the pieces that comes up and then it comes back up again over and over again is this enrollment frequency. Um, Many groups we look to do 2 GI periods, and part of that depend in the first year, and part of that depends on the type of group that it is, how easy it is to get a hold of those people, to do the education of those people. Again, there's a lot of factors that might come into that. So again, if it's a small group and it's 10 people and it's an employee, you probably don't need 2 GI periods. If it's a very large group and it's spread out, maybe 2 GI periods make more sense. We normally want to do an off cycle for your very first enrollment, so you get a lot more attention on this particular benefit instead of trying to educate everyone at the same time that they're doing all their initial benefits to begin with. The second enrollment, though, oftentimes you do want to line up with your regular benefit period. So if you do an off enrollment in March, but the normal enrollment period has an effective date of a 1/1, then you probably want to do an effective date of 1/1, and then you want to roll your second one into that automatic benefit period of the 1/1 effective date. So those would generally be those two. The piece that gets everybody, though, is the new hires. A lot of companies, almost every company out there, offers benefits usually within the first 30 days, 60 days, that type of information for a new hire. We don't always, in fact, I don't recommend it usually at all unless you're very well versed in what the product is. A new hire is going to get a GI offer once. So you have a choice. You can get it in your first 31 days of employment when you're trying to do all of your other benefits and learn your job. which means you have to learn all the information about long-term care in order to make an informed decision. Because again, this is not $6 a month term insurance. It it's got a lot more to it. So it usually takes a lot more education, a lot more thought. If what I recommend usually is that all new hires are have GI at open enrollment, which means that anyone who is hired from the time your last enrollment until your next open enrollment, all those people, it might be 6 months, might be 12 months, all have a GI period with education, with time to understand what the product is at one time. It's not right and wrong. We've got plenty of people that do it both ways, but you don't get it both ways. You only get it one way or the other. Once you've seen an offer, that is your GI period. So that's
Sandy,
something that you usually want to discuss ahead of time.
just as a follow-up to that, let's say they're also funding a base plan for their employees and their new hires. What would you recommend in that situation?
Then I recommend that they do the ER funding at the time of hire and that the voluntary is still done at open enrollment.
That- so I know there are even more details that we can kind of go into here on the implementation side, the sold group side. I guess we've talked about the availability of, say, ACH versus payroll deduction. And to be clear for everybody on the call, Sandy doesn't just help with the administration of one enrollment platform. We may have a need for, I would say three different platforms to enroll group long-term care plans, depending on carrier, depending on group specifics. So Sandy, can you just give us an idea of range of motion, what is available to who as far as payroll deduction versus ACH, or kind of how to administer or identify what enrollment platform we may have to use given a group?
Yep, absolutely. Um, if you have a group that is ER funded and it's under 25 employees, for instance, and even if you're going to offer voluntary on top of that, that's a relatively easy process to go through. And we have a platform called Easy Apps Online, which does that very, very well. But now let's say you have a group of 200 people and they want to do all voluntary and they want to do direct ACH to the employees. Again, something that we highly recommend simply because it's a lot easier to port that policy when you leave if you don't actually have to go through the process of being taken off a payroll deduction, porting your policy and going on a different plan. You're much more likely to keep the policy if you do a direct ACH. Direct ACH usually takes longer to set up across the board, and not every platform can accept ACH. So generally speaking, groups over 25, ACH is probably a good option for the voluntary if you want to do it. Groups under 25, I generally do not recommend ACH. You can do it, but we have many more restrictions on what it would be.
Okay. Um, is there anything else that you feel like volunteering that you think would be useful to folks on the call? Otherwise, I have more questions.
When it comes to long-term care, if a group has never had group long-term care before, they don't know what they don't know, I guess is the easiest thing to say. So I mean, a lot of the brokers that we work with, again, are not somebody who has sold a lot of long-term care group. Nobody sold a lot of long-term care group, just across the board. So again, sometimes you just want to ask for what is the best practice? What do you recommend? Just as I said, I recommend that you do all your new hires once a year, and this is why, just so that the group can be informed. They can make a different decision. There's no problem with that. It's just you might have to ask for what the best practice is when you're going to sell a group because the group may not know.
I think that's a great piece of advice because oftentimes they don't realize how much you are just kind of spread out taking the arrows in the back that could be coming their way, um, if they decide to go outside of best practices or maybe path of least resistance sorts of ways of setting up enrollments. So I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of what you do is help people look out for those kind of friction points, those potholes from carriers. So I would agree. I would take Sandy's advice on a lot of this stuff with groups that, I'm moving forward. I'm generally asking Sandy what she thinks would be best. I think she's the one on our team who has kind of the most experience on this end of things to know um, where you may run into certain difficulties. So I think, it's great to use Sandy as a consultant when you're kind of at the end zone with the group, ready to move it forward.
Yeah,
Mark, do you have anything?
I would add one more thing to it, which is we've done a lot of group business now, and we've never been able to not solve an issue. That's a double negative,
Yes.
I know. So we're always able to find a solution to whatever the situation is. But the one thing we do get tripped up on is not having enough time. So we need at least 30 days to set this up after they sign the group application. And usually it's more closer to 2 months, 60 days. The more time you give Sandy, the more she can make sure that it's set up correctly and work with the carriers. Even if exceptions are needed, we can usually get those granted. But if you're coming to us, like, hey, it's December 11th and I have a 1/1 effective date group and I need to enroll this today, that's where we really can't, come up with a solution. So just keep that in mind is just let the client know, set expectations, set that effective date out at least 2 months. And then usually, you won't have to worry about that when you bring it to Sandy.
Does anybody on the call
You
have
want
any
to,
questions for Sandy? Even if you're not at the point where you have a group case toward the end, I think whether it's front end or back end, Sandy has a lot to offer as far as her wisdom. It's a little differentiated from what Mark and I offer.
does anyone want to talk about how you get paid or how much you get paid or
Who
what's the
would want to
difference in
talk
how you
about
get
that?
paid?
I don't know anybody who would want to talk about that. Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Because we don't work for free. That would be any of us.
That's right.
Sometimes we feel like it, but we really don't. So with groups, Buddy generally has a couple different ways that we can work with you, and it really depends on what you want and how much work you want to do yourself, how comfortable you are, how well you can work with the individual group that you are working with. Our full service model, call it our white glove service, is a 50-50 application split. So whatever the commission level is, um, again, we both take 50% of it. For that 50%, what we would be doing is kind of controlling the whole thing. We're going to work with your HR. We're going to schedule and perform the webinars. Gretchen is going to work with HR as far as all the marketing and education emails. We're going to set up a landing page. We're going to get you your calculators. Um, I'm going to get your group apps taken care of. I'm going to make sure the enrollment platforms are all set up correctly. We're going to have specialists that the employees can talk to if they have any questions in regards to, is this right for me? Or what's the correct amount of coverage I should have? Or can you look at a policy that I already have? Again, we're going to take care of all of that for you. And you are going to be the relationship. You are going to be the one that is on the calls with the group. Again, because it is your relationship. You are the one that's there. You're the one that's going to help keep it going. And you're the one that's going to, that they're going to come to if there's a problem. So we're going to make sure you don't have a problem. We always recommend this if you have not sold groups or if you've not sold group long-term care, because there are a lot of aspects to it. Now, if we have a broker, and we do have plenty of those too, that sell a lot of groups, they're used to it. They work with small groups, for instance. They've been working with them for 10 or 15 years on all their other benefits, and they know long-term care. We can also do an 80-20 application split on that. That would be 20 for us, 80% for the broker, or combination of brokers. Sometimes there's multiple people within that, but Buddy would only take 20%. For that 20%, I'm still going to take care of getting your group app signed and making sure your enrollment platform is the correct platform and it is set up correctly. And we can still get you a landing page to go with that should you need it. but you are going to take care of any educational information or any webinars or working directly with the HR themselves. We wouldn't be working directly with HR. You do have obviously access to all of our tools, our many, many tools in the buddy system, as well as that enrollment process. We've got a lot of templates, a lot of things that can help you sell as well. But you would take on that lift of working with the actual group itself, and all the education and making sure the enrollment is taken care of and answering any questions if any of those applicants have any questions in regards to the platform or the policies.
I think we've seen an experience, Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, where there is a number of people who say go full service on a first enrollment. They feel like they get eyes on it and really start to understand how it's done. And some think, given the resources that I have, given the history I have in group, I just want to utilize the enrollment platform and any other tools. But I do think there's a decent subset of people who actually feel as if their time is better spent elsewhere, meeting more groups, working in different sectors of their business, things of that nature, but still feel comfortable in being the person that, gets the group reps that we need to talk to on calls, is still obviously there, is maybe helping relay any concerns the group has, but other than that, kind of letting us take the wheel. Would you say it's about even, or would you say there is a higher subset of folks who prefer, say, self-service?
I'm going to say that we really probably do about 70% full service and maybe only 30% that we do a smaller application split. And most of those, again, are with those brokers who have been selling group to specific groups, other benefits for quite a while, and they know it. But we can get with the buddy contracts, you're going to get the top level contracts that you need. So you're going to get a better deal. You're going to get some special offers through buddy, some premier offers that we can have. So um, again, a lot of people will do that, but again, the majority are going to do the full service.
I think many folks too who have kind of figured it out to the point where they feel like they need the platform only are kind of you know, those who specialize, you mentioned kind of length of relationship, but those who specialize in working with small groups and kind of have a process really nailed down for themselves. So that's maybe not to say that people who are using full service now might not become folks who just use the enrollment platform later. I just think folks who have gotten there in an early stage kind of have a process nailed down. I think of a few people who, once the group is ready to enroll, they may even be able to be there on site and use the platform that we use for small groups to personally enroll employees, kind of one by one on a one-to-one basis. So I feel like when people kind of get their sea legs as far as understanding their process of how to enroll, whether it's something they've learned from us or something they've kind of always known to work for them or a combination of both, um, generally that person has a pretty good idea of their own process and we kind of mold around it to help them.
Absolutely. And every case can be different. Again, you can have a small case that you know everyone and you want to more or less do it yourself. You just need the platform and the contacts. You then, I don't know, 2 months later, you have a 500 person group that you know that you can't support the entire group by yourself. It's too much and you want to use our services again. It is a group by group basis. So whatever the application split is, again, it just is simply depends on a group by group, what you want to do and what you need us to do.
Yeah, Jason, I'd also add, cases that have a lot of voluntary component to them, you're going to want to leverage us more
Agreed.
because there is more sale happening after the enrollment, right? Because you have to convince the employees to buy it. You're going to have the education component. So the reality of it is the cases that I recommend self-service are, let's say you have a high amount of employer funding And that's really where the sale is made. It's not an easy thing to get the employer to want to pay for this benefit, for all the executives. That's where I say that's you've done a lot of the sale already because the employer is paying for it. You want to keep a lot of that commission too, and we can census enroll that and make the enrollment easier. That tends to work really well, from your perspective, to do those cases. If there's a big voluntary component too, though, I would suggest working with us more because of that lift that's needed. And a lot of times that's even educating them on the benefit they're getting paid by the employer. But don't scrimp on that. It's really critical that if the employer is buying something for their employees, you do some education about it, right? Because
100%.
why else are they offering this if nobody knows of the value they're providing? They're not getting their money's worth.
Yeah, and the sale at the group level is altogether easier the more voluntary there is, especially if it's full voluntary enrollment, right? You know, if I'm the decision maker for a group, I automatically have in my mind, well, I can offer a new benefit to my employees. I don't have to pay anything out of pocket, and you know, the broker and their team is going to really enroll it for me. That, yes, comes a lot easier than having to break out the checkbook in many cases, right? But that also means that the sale is far from over. And there's another layer of sale to be had there. And there's not as much of a sweetener, like you said, with an employer funded component to really stimulate people to check this out, take it on earnestly, and perhaps buy up.
Yeah. We usually also do those things in steps. So like we usually will do the employer funded enrollment first. And Sandy, you can tell me if you agree with this approach, but if you do that at census enrollment first and your voluntary is, 30 days later, that tends to be a good sequence because we already know what they purchased, so we know how much they can add to that coverage at the voluntary stage. But that way you don't have to say no, because it's rare for us to run into an HR team that doesn't want to offer this as a voluntary benefit if they're already offering it as an employer-funded benefit. It only kind of adds incremental value to them if there's not extra work on their plate to do it. So I don't want you to ever feel conflicted to say no to that question because what is our goal? It's to get the education out there and to get this benefit out there to as many people as possible. Why would we limit them, if they're paying out of their own hard-earned paycheck or ACH, their bank account, from accessing this offer that they can't get in the individual market? So we want to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to provide that. And don't just hit the easy button, just because, oh, I just want to do the census enrollment and be done with it. You're losing out maybe on a much bigger opportunity to acquire a lot more clients and help a lot more people.
100%. Sandy, one of the other things I want to talk about just in regard to your area is I think the frontier we've probably covered the least on this study group is what does it look like in the days, weeks, months after an enrollment closes and ends? That's where we really start to, until kind of a next enrollment, enter sort of a servicing phase, more or less, and making sure that everybody is secure. They know where they need to go to make any changes to their benefits. They maybe are trying to track down their certificate. And of course, in some cases, simplified issue underwriting is still underway if the group has that. So, can you just give us some perspective as to what that's like and why that adds to your already special resume of how you help groups?
Yeah, I call that hell month, but sometimes some groups are super easy. Any group that does have SI, whether that be just for spouses or they're doing SI for, again, anything over GI, does go through underwriting. The group carriers are not that good with SI underwriting. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. They can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months to underwrite a policy.
Sounds like individual.
Yeah, very, very much so, except for they're a lot more black and white.
Hmm.
They would rather just say no sometimes. then get more information. One of the big things, though, I'm going to say with simplified issue is you have to have a HIPAA form. So everyone is offered that. The number of people who don't actually sign it would actually surprise you. But nobody can do anything. Again, they can't do it. Even if they did a interview that they need to do, a medical interview, it doesn't count if they didn't have HIPAA form signed before they did it. They can't, once they have that done, they're usually going to get a telescript. Okay, once they get that telescript comes back, if it has any contradictory information from what was put on the application, then they're going to go back and they might ask for a second interview because they're looking for more information. So we get an underwriting report from most of the carriers every single week that we would pass on to you if you were the one that was actually servicing or working with the group itself. That is the easiest way I'm going to say that, to let you know, hey, these are the people that need these requirements. Even though the carrier themselves or the TPA for that carrier is going to be contacting each one of those people. Again, I don't usually answer phone numbers that I don't recognize. Again, we get 100 emails in our email box every single day. Did you miss something that came from AB, whatever? I mean, so it can be hard to let people know that this is something you need or something to look for. There is usually a delay. For some carriers, the delay from the time that you actually enroll until your policy effective date might be 6 weeks. There's a lot of people that forget what's going on in that 6 week period. So we tend to lose some people, easiest way to say that, potentially in that 6 week period because they haven't heard anything. We try to be very proactive. I'm going to start with that though, of letting people know these are your next steps. This is what to expect. So if it's we're going to use an Allstate group. Allstate has a very short period, usually from the time that you finish enrolling until your effective date, which is really awesome. So it might only be a week, might be 2 weeks. So you'll get a note from us to say, hey, in the next 2 weeks, your effective date is this. You should expect your first payroll deduction to happen around this period of time. You should get an email from, in this case, Standard Allstate, with information on how you can log into your portal, which is where you can find this type of information. So communication is probably the number one piece that needs to happen in that first 30, 60 days. I signed up. You told me it was going to cost me $400 a month. What do I get? I feel like I've fallen into a black hole. So that communication is super, super important to make sure people know, yes, you do have a policy. I'll also throw out, because this kind of comes up there, is a lot of people, the hybrid policies are, you're buying a life policy. And when those policy documents come out or they go and look into their benefits portal and it says you bought life insurance, you're going, I thought I bought long-term care insurance. Yeah, education, the piece is yes, you did get long-term care as the main rider on this and the benefits behind this, but legally what the carrier has to tell you is that you bought long-term care, or excuse me, you bought life insurance, whether it be term insurance or whole insurance or anything else. So again, that education process of making sure people know that this is the chassis that supplies the benefit that you are purchasing. So I'm going to say that whole speech there goes down to communication,
Education and
letting
communication
people
matters
know what is happening.
at every single step. There's not a single step where you can be light on it, right? And I think it's good that you went over that because there's, a lot that happens ongoing with groups once they're sold that, Sandy is working with the carriers to help make a smooth process. And of course, we know we're not perfect and carriers are not perfect, but a lot I think of what Sandy does is kind of to protect you from the carrier in spite of the carrier. Now we work with great people who are trying their best, but at insurance carriers, there are there are times where things can just get a little messy in the process. And there are also times where we expect something as part of the process that an employee or a group couldn't possibly anticipate ahead of time, right? You just signed up for a plan. You got your certificate online. That's great. They're not going to know that it may take 2 to 3 weeks to get access to the employee portal where they can go in and look at their benefits and make changes, right? So it's kind of our duty to speak to that for them because otherwise, 2 to 3 weeks after you enroll, hearing nothing makes you question, right? Did I actually sign up for anything? Is this actually coverage that I have? Are they ever gonna draft my bank account? Um, Uncertainty just leads to questions, which leads to work, which leads to people questioning you, right? At the end of the day. Um, Anything else, Sandy, that you want to discuss or make sure everybody on the call or watching the recording knows, or any questions that anybody has for Sandy who's on the call?
Well, people are thinking about that. Let me tell you, as a broker, any of you can call and work with the carrier reps at any time. You have a client that has a group client that has a question, you are welcome to call the carrier. With the understanding that sometimes that's people, that's not even carriers. People let things go into a black hole. Well, I don't have the answer, so I'm not going to respond until I get that answer, and they've got to ask for other people. So your email feels like it went into a black hole. If you email me or the carrier and me, your email will not go into a black hole. I might not have the answer for you, but I'm going to tell you I'm working on the answer. I'm going to give you a time frame in which I expect to have an answer. And if I don't have an answer, I'll let you know I'm still working on it. But you're never going to feel like you went into a black hole. So again, you always 100% have access to the carrier. Do realize if you email me or any of the team here, we usually have to go through the carrier to get the answer. Um, but we will respond to you. That's the servicing part. That is part of the white glove part. That is one of the reasons to work with Buddy. We're not going to leave you in a black hole.
Couldn't have said it better, and I vouch for that, especially for you. Sandy is our chief firefighter, 100%. So if you get to the point where Sandy starts to come into your life, treat her with the utmost respect and care because she lifts boulders that I don't want to lift. That's for sure. I'll just say that. Um, so really appreciate it, Sandy. Anybody have any questions? Um, Otherwise, I think
No,
we
well, I
can.
want to give Sandy a compliment too. I've never met a more calm person in my life under fire. So that is like super impressive and it's super important for this role, right? When you have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of moving parts to it. So really appreciate Sandy, your calm. It's
Unflappability.
incredibly helpful.
You know what?
I
At
mean,
the
no
end,
questions. I mean, operations, especially back end insurance operations, are not sexy and they're not fun, but
everybody will save their questions for when they have an active case, but I hope they do remember that this recording is here and remember what they've learned today. And just remember the big principles, right? Everything we teach you guys on this study group is derivative of a few basic principles. Be proactive, communicate even if there's no updates to communicate, and show up, right? I think if you follow those kind of three commandments, so to speak, you're gonna get the success that you're looking for out of this business. So
So Sandy, I have a non-insurance related question for you. Just kind of a hot topic right now. I know you're based around Indianapolis. What do you think about Philip Rivers being the quarterback of the Colts? That's pretty crazy, right?
that is very crazy. Yes.
44 years old, one of San Diego's finest.
Hey,
He's not the oldest to ever play. I'm in
That's
don't
true.
Indianapolis
disparage
too,
age.
so we're hearing all about it.
That's true.
He's got a lot of wisdom at this point, a lot of experience.
He's also got a lot of children, I've heard. I hear he's got this like mega van that he takes to practices for he and all of his kids.
He may not be done. We'll see how the season ends. Who knows? I'm talking
Well,
about children and football. Who knows?
Never too late, I guess, for either, right? All right, I think that will do it then. Really appreciate you guys being here. Sandy, really appreciate you just imparting your knowledge from your perspective. I think we can kind of speak at a high level to a lot of these things, but when we have you on to speak from experience, I think it hits home even more. So appreciate y'all if you were here, and if you watched the recording. Uh, we will see you this time next week. Remember, Gretchen put the link in for our annual market review 2025, 2026. So if you have anybody you'd like to share that with, feel free to distribute that link. Otherwise, all you have to do is show up here on the 8th, and we'll be putting on a show for you.
The biggest difference is there'll be a couple of hundred of your closest friends. A little bit
Yes,
bigger audience.
agreed. Agreed. Well, we're looking forward to it. Appreciate having you here. Be well, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.